How were judges to act when they judged the people? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 16. We're going to be reading from verses 18 to 22. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 16, beginning of verse 18. You shall appoint judges and officers in your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. You shall follow what is altogether just, that you may live and inherit the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar which you build for yourself to the Lord your God. You shall not set up a secret pillar which the Lord your God hates. In this chapter, we have been discussing the pilgrimage feasts of the Lord, the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. All three of these feasts coincided with the harvest seasons in Israel. The Feast of Passover coincided with the barley harvest in early spring. The Feast of Weeks coincided with the wheat harvest in late spring. And the Feast of Tabernacles coincided with the end of harvest in early autumn. Each of these feasts commemorated something special in Israel's history. But they were also at times to be thankful for what God had done for them as a people since leaving Egypt. Coming down to verse 18, we have another instance where the people who put chapters and verses in the Bible, for some reason, thought to end this chapter with this section instead of begin the 17th chapter with this section, for it better fits with that chapter than it does with this one. This section begins by talking about judges. When Israel left Egypt, Moses was their sole judge. In the wilderness on the way to Sinai, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, saw that Moses was too busy to judge the nation by himself, so he suggested that he appoint judges to judge the lesser matters, leaving the major things for him to judge. When doing my research for these podcasts, I came across someone who said that in Exodus 18, when Moses did this, he did so without God's authority, although God allowed Moses to do it. His point was that appointing judges in Israel was not of God, but an idea of man for convenience, a convenience that eventually led to corruption and the death of Jesus in the New Testament, for these collection of judges eventually became the Sanhedrin. The problem with that interpretation is that the passage in Exodus 18 doesn't say that God was displeased with this, which I believe he would have if it hadn't been his will. That is why I don't believe Moses appointed judges on his own, but would have consulted God about it too, just as he did in Numbers 11 when God had Moses appoint 70 elders over Israel. I think this conclusion is further borne out by what we read of here in Deuteronomy 16, where God told Moses that Israel was going to have to select judges throughout their generations. If God wanted judicial authority to rest upon one man, one leader in Israel, like it had with Moses, he could have done so, but he didn't. He had Moses tell Israel that they would appoint judges over their cities who would judge in matters that needed judgment. But these positions of judges couldn't just be given to any person. They needed to be given to those who could judge with just judgment. They needed to be honest, impartial, and not prone to favoritism. They must not be covetous people who would be tempted to take a bribe in order to pervert justice. When it came to the Sanhedrin of Jesus' day, those who acted as judges there were the exact opposite of what's described here. They weren't just men. They perverted justice. They paid liars to come in so that they could convict Jesus of a crime, which of course they couldn't because not even the liars could agree amongst themselves as to what Jesus did. When it comes to judgment, God is very serious about how it is to be meted out because God is a holy God. If Israel had a reputation of having unjust judges, that would be a reflection upon the character of God, for Israel was to be known as the people of the one true God. Add to that God's judgments are always right, and he wanted Israel's judges to follow his example and judge righteously. The chapter ends by again telling us that Israel was not to build idol pillars in worship to other gods. In this case, the word that is used is Asherah, a goddess in the ancient pantheon that would be worshipped with sacred poles or stylized trees. This is why in the English translations of this passage you see the word grove here, and in the New King James Version the command is not to plant any tree as a wooden image to worship near the altar of God. We will see throughout our further studies of the Old Testament, and attested to by archaeology, ancient Israel disobeyed this command, which is why God got angry with them, which ultimately led to captivity. Idolatry was to be abhorred by Israel, and it is to be abhorred by us today. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 1 to 7, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.